Critic Ventures, 'tis I, Nathaniel Gomezian, shopkeeper and proprietor of Gaming Treasure Chest, and today we're going to be going through another 5 puzzles that you can throw at your players for them to have fun with and, you know, bamboozle them and such. Let's get into this.
So the first puzzle is a very roleplay heavy puzzle, but it can be a lot of fun to play depending on what your party's like. So it's called The Password Is, and the reason for this is because the setup, your party walk into this room, there is a big door that's got like a doorbell, a bell, or just a knocker on the door itself, but it's a great stone door. And above the door, there is like carving in whichever language you want that seems appropriate. You can also just have it in common, and it will say something like the password is, and then whatever word you want. So let's say like the password is bananas. So what this causes is a subversion of expectation, because the party will then probably start saying bananas, 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 and nothing will happen. The door won't open and they'll just be standing there shouting bananas. But if the party decide to ring the bell, knock the knocker, or whatever it is that you've got next to this, this is where it all begins, because what happens is the doorway comes to life in terms of like a face appears within the door, and this is where the role play and good times happen, because the idea of this puzzle is that they have to get the door to say what the password is. So the puzzle and the roleplay aspect of this is the party trying to get the door to say the word, which is the password, which will make it unlock. Now, this is where the little extra bit of fun comes in, is that when they ring the bell, knock the knocker, or whatever it is, roll a d6, because if it's a 1 or a 2, that's one personality, a 3 or a 4, it's another personality, and a 5 and a 6, it's a different personality, because this door has got 3 different personalities, and each of them has got strengths, weaknesses, and depends on whether or not, as a DM, if you're confident to pull this off, you don't have to do this aspect of the puzzle. You can just have it so that the door is just one personality, and the party are trying to trick it into just saying the password, but the door has got some sentience of knowing that like it shouldn't really say the words. So the idea is that the party has got to convince them. But if you're going down the 3 personality route, let's just give these personalities names. You can call them whatever you want, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to call them these names. So the first personality is Selwyn. The idea behind Selwyn is he's an intelligent, vain, and arrogant personality, and the idea is that he might belittle the party. You're showing him as being a bit of a pompous prick, basically, is what Selwyn is. Thinks that he's more intelligent than everyone, very arrogant and vain. The second personality, let's call them Billy. The idea behind Billy is that he's a little dumb, but he's kind and he's a happy one, so that's the whole purpose with him, is a little bit dumb and happy. With the third personality being Miles. Miles is a bit nervous and timid and scared and just wants to be left alone. And the idea of this is that you can play with those personalities and interact with the party in different ways depending on which one it is. And if they ring the bell again, then you roll another d6, and who knows, they might swap it out and have a different person. Depending on what your party's trying to do to convince them, be it deceive, persuade, or intimidate, each of these different personalities has got different DCs depending on what they're trying to do. So Selwyn is very intelligent, but he's arrogant. So the whole idea behind Selwyn is that he's easy to persuade. If the party play up to his vanity and compliment him, his intelligence and everything, they might be able to dupe him into saying the password by going down that route. So he's got a lower DC on persuasion. His intimidation is quite a standard one, so you could say along the lines of, for all of these, you could say whatever's green, it's like maybe a 14 in order to be able to convince them. Anything that's in yellow, maybe like an 18 or something for them to be able to pass. And if it's in red, then that personality is completely immune to that possibility. So the idea of it is, obviously, like I said, with his arrogance and his intelligence, he can be persuaded, he can be intimidated, but it's a bit harder, but he can't be deceived, because his intelligence is so much that deception just fails against Selwyn. With Billy, deception is the easiest thing to do because he's a bit dumb. He's quite easy to be able to be deceived. You can also try to persuade him, but it's a little bit harder to do that. But he can't be intimidated because he's so dumb he doesn't realise that you're trying to intimidate him, so he cannot be intimidated into saying the password. which leaves us with Miles, and Miles is that he can be very easily intimidated. He can be deceived, but he cannot be persuaded because his nervousness and fear of the consequences means that he cannot be persuaded into telling the password. And so you can just have fun with that roleplay wise until the party manages to get the door to say the password, whatever it is, bananas or whatever, and then they can proceed because the door then opens. So it's a little bit of a fun puzzle, but as I said, it's all roleplay heavy base. So it depends on whether or not you're comfortable with that. As I said, you can just have it so that you don't have these three personalities and you do just have one personality that you're trying to get them to convince, and you can set the DCs to whatever you want it to be, because you could just play one of these personalities as being the door and have it as being that it's easier to persuade them than it is to intimidate them, and they can't be whatever deceived, or that if you were saying that the door is just Selwyn instead of having the other ones. But as I said, this is just a little variant that I throw in there, and I said you can do whatever you want. Those are the personalities that I've come up with. You can come up with whatever personalities that you want to have the door, and like whatever DCs that you want. I said that's just a rough guide, it's not an exact science. It's whatever you feel is appropriate. So yeah, that is the first puzzle. So the second puzzle that you can throw at your players, I call it the magic mirror. And the idea of this is that the setup is that your players walk into this room and you can see that maybe there's like a table and chairs, there's maybe a bookcase, there's whatever, but they cannot see an exit in this room. Now, if your party decide to investigate, they might see the massive mirror that is on the wall. And in that mirror, there is the door, but the door is not projected in the room that they're in. But if they look at the actual mirror image, they'll see that the room, while looking very similar, is not actually the room that they're in. And by that, I mean that there'll be subtle differences, like maybe there's a table and chairs, but in your room, they're intact. But in the mirror, they're broken and like they're shattered on the floor. Or the bookcase might have like one or two books ajar, or like slightly sticking out, or there might be the arrangement of certain things, like on the windowsill or something along those lines, might be different in terms of like as you can see here, like an apple decoration might be on there, or the flowers might be a different way round, or whatever. And the idea of this puzzle is that you want the players to recreate what is in the mirror, because if they recreate what is in the mirror, that is what will make the door appear. So they have to shatter the table or the chair or whatever's broken in the picture. They have to put the books askew, which are in the bookcase if they are slightly like that. They have to move things around in the room. You could also have, like I'm just looking at this picture here, a clock or something, and the clock is set to a certain time, so they have to set the clock to a certain time. You could have torches, which some are lit and some are not, and so they have to light the ones which are lit and turn off the ones which aren't, things like that. And you can have a lot of fun with this puzzle, including the fact that you can include things like when they try to do something, maybe the room might react. Like if they pull out a book, then maybe like a spell shoots out at them or something, like something that they're not expecting, if they don't look for traps or something along those lines. Like, you can also have something along the lines of if there's an item which isn't in the room and they go over to remove it, that maybe it's a mimic or something along those lines, like maybe the apple that's on the windowsill, oh no crap, it's actually a mimic, and there's a battle which takes place. You don't have to include things like that. You could just have it that they have to put the things the way there is in the mirror, but these are little things that you can add if you want to add some element of danger or combat or whatever. Like I said, the idea of these puzzles are that they're completely versatile and you can do whatever you want with them, whichever seems best. And obviously you know your party better than what I would, so you'd know what they might enjoy and just little things that you can add on. So that is the magic mirror puzzle. So on to puzzle 3. I'm going to call puzzle 3 the animal gems puzzle. So the setup for this puzzle is they kind of walk in and there's like a central room whereby there is a doorway going onwards, but they can't get through that door. But there are 4 rooms connected to this room. And the idea is that once they open those doors, then they'll find the following. One room might have loads of spider webs and things in there, and if your party tried to get their way through, they can get stuck and potentially start a battle with spiders. You can also have this room as being maybe like there are enemies in it and that they've got to creep their way through, but with the spider webs it makes it very hard. The second room, as they walk into it, it can be like quite a large room that's got steps leading down and into water. and it's very deep water that if they try, like, it's very hard for them to be able to reach the bottom because, like, their lungs won't allow them to go that far down and not come up for air. The third room can have, like, really, like, a rocky terrain, like a quite like a mountainous in terms of the fact that it goes really high up into the ceiling, and that it'd be quite hard for them to be able to get up, like, the platforms that are quite high up. And the fourth room, as they go into it, there'd be a little tiny hole that they could put their hand into maybe, but it kind of like twists and turns, and like their hand isn't able to do that. But back in the central room that these rooms are connected to, there could be like some plinths, and on those plinths can be 4 gemstones. Now, admittedly, so there's different ways that you can do this. You can have it that they might find these gemstones earlier on in the dungeon, or you can have it that there's some kind of little puzzle that they've got to do to obtain these gemstones. There's a number of things that you can put into this, but the idea behind this is that you give them these gemstones, and these gemstones are all in different shapes. I don't know why the hell I'm doing a spinny thing on that. They're different shapes. One's in the shape of a spider, one's in the shape of an octopus, one's in the shape of some kind of bird like an eagle or something, and one's in the shape of a mouse. So you can also have this room as like a little plinth which says something along the lines of "Hold me aloft, say my name, and become." And so if the party's able to figure that out, what they realise, if they hold like the spider and say spider, they'll turn into a spider. Hold the octopus, say octopus, you turn into an octopus. Hold the eagle, say eagle, turn into an eagle. Hold mouse, say mouse, turn into a mouse. And the fun with this, this just made me think of Power Rangers with the Triceratops. But anyway,
Triceratops!
the idea is that they can use the different forms in the different rooms to be able to progress through them. So the spider, if they crawl across like certain webs and whatnot, they don't trigger the other spiders that might attack them, and they can go through all the way to the end where there is a lever. Same with the octopus, can dive all the way down to the bottom of the very depths of the water where there is also a lever. At the very high peak of one of the mountain ranges, there would be a lever that the bird can fly up to, and in the little hole, if the mouse goes through it, there's like a little tiny maze, but at the end of that maze is a lever. Now, if you want to make this a little bit more complicated, you can have it that all the levers have to be pulled within a certain time. So if your party have not got any way of communicating with each other, that might be hard for them to try and set up, like if they have to be pulled at the same time, or if like there's a certain time limit behind, like once one is pulled, all the others have to be pulled within a minute or something. Otherwise, the door won't stay open, because the idea of it is that they can then come back and the big door that was in the central room is now open, and that's the idea behind this puzzle. Now, with this setup, you can change it around however you want. You don't have to have these animals, you don't have to have these rooms. You can have whatever rooms that you think are appropriate for different animals. Also, obviously, the spider could technically go down the mouse hole if they wanted to, like if they're small enough to be able to do that. You can have the mouse maybe be able to skitter through the webs. You can also obviously have the spider climb up a mountain if that's the way that the party wanted to do things. And of course, your party just might not realise this at all and might actually just go through exploring through these rooms as much as they can. Like, I guess let's face it, there are different spells. You have druid, so druid might be able just to turn themselves into one of these shapes, or somebody might just try to scale the mountains, like, you know, with a climbing gear or something, or fight their way through the spiders within the webbed room, or have like some potion or spell that can make them smaller so that they can fit through the hole, or like a potion of like water breathing or whatever it's called. My mind can't remember these things, but the idea is that there are different ways that your party might go about this other than using these gemstones. So it is open for like multiple solutions, but the idea of it is that they get through them to pull the lever. Now, the fun bit of this puzzle comes with whether or not you decide to allow these gemstones to work outside of whichever like a dungeon, temple, or whatever this is set up, so that people can actually leave the area and still be able to turn into these different things. Now, you can do this and it can be a lot of fun. However, I wouldn't recommend allowing them to be able to use this magic outside of the temple or dungeon or whatever this is in, if you've got a druid in the party, because I feel like that might be a bit upsetting to them. Let's face it, if they've chosen a druid, it's because what stands out about them, and one of the things that makes them unique is the fact that they can wild shape into whatever animal that they want, and having other members of the party doing that, it kind of takes away from what makes them special. So I wouldn't recommend allowing this magic to happen if you outside of the area, if you have a druid in the party. But obviously, communication is key here, right? So you can always talk to that player and be like, look, these items, I can have it so that it allows the other party members to be able to shapeshift into these animals, but I completely understand if you don't want that to be a thing, because obviously that's your thing. I don't want to take that away from you. So you can speak to your party members, but as I said, I wouldn't recommend, if you've got a druid, allowing this to happen outside. But it's just a little fun little puzzle which allows different classes to be able to experience like a shapeshifting into like animals and that, and it's just a fun little puzzle that you can throw at people. Now the fourth puzzle I've kind of taken from another game which you might have heard of called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. But the actual idea of using this in like a roleplay kind of game actually came to me when I played the We Were Here. I don't know if you've played those games, but the idea of it is that like two people are kind of split up and have to talk through radios, and they have to solve puzzles being in two separate areas, and so they have to communicate the different things that they can see. And that reminded me of this puzzle in Keep Talking and No One Explodes. So let's get into it. The setup for this puzzle is that your party walk into this room, and along the walls there are different symbols that are carved out into different stones all around the room. If your party try to press any of them, nothing happens at this point, but there are like different symbols that are all etched all over the room. Can be on the floor, can be on the walls, ceiling if you want. And as they look around the room, they'll see in one of the corners there's like a little corridor that at the end of it there is a lever. Now you can also have like a little message somewhere along here, either on the side or at the end of that corridor, which says only one may enter. And the idea of it is that only one person can enter and pull the handle. If your party all go in there and pull the handle, nothing will happen. Only when there is only one person, because like you can see there's like pressure plates underneath the floors. When only one party member goes in there, as they pull the lever, they are cut off from the rest of the party as a bit of wall comes down or up or whichever way to shut them off down in this little corridor, and they are on their own in there with the lever while the other party are left out. Now they can still speak to each other and hear each other through the wall, but they can't see what the other members can see. This is the part of the puzzle where it does come down to a little bit of trust between you and your players. If you're playing at a table, separate out the person who's gone down the corridor and pulled the lever like slightly away from the rest of the party so that they can't see the table, and that the people at the table can't really see them or what they're holding or anything along those lines. As long as they can still hear each other, then you're all good. If you're playing an online game, then just send this image to the person who is down the corridor. Now hopefully, as I said, this is where a little bit of trust comes in, because as long as they don't just send that message on to the rest of the party and they do decide to play ball, this could be a very fun little puzzle. So here's what happens is that the person who's separated gets the following piece of paper. I've even got one here, but anyway, they get given this piece of paper, or as if you send this image to the person if it's an online game, and they can see this, but obviously the rest of the party can't. So what you can say is that as they've pulled the lever, this has appeared on the wall in glowing text, and in the room the rest of the players are in, certain symbols have started to light up. And so, for example, you could have these 4 symbols have started to light up in the player room. And you can put the 4 symbols, like the ones that are on this example, on the table for the rest of the players. And so the idea about what's happening here is that the players have got to describe what these symbols look like, and the person who's in there with the lever has then got to be listening to what they're saying, looking at what they can see and trying to work out what has got to happen and what this means. If you want to, you can add the words first and last, like first right at the top of the piece of paper and last at the very bottom of the piece of paper, because the idea of this is that these symbols match up to one of these columns, and the order in which the players have to push these symbols is depicted by the columns. So for example, with this one, all of these images are in the second row in terms of the star, the circle with the little tail. You've got the backwards C with a dot in it, and you've got the kind of H with a little bit on the bottom. This is where the fun comes in, is in terms of your party members having to describe what these symbols are to each other and hearing the different figures. Believe me, you can hear a lot of different things. Little triangle man holding a shield is always funny to hear. So once they say what all the symbols look like, those symbols only connect to one of these columns. So always make sure that whichever one, because obviously this is just an example, whichever one you choose, make sure that you're only choosing from one column, and then the player who's in there with the lever can tell them, okay, right, so they need to do the circle with the little bit first, then the backwards C with the dot, then the star, then the H. because whatever's nearest the top that they can see is what goes first, and then they make their way down the column is the idea behind the sequencing of this. Now, you can just do this as a one-off, or you can do it that they put in those symbols in that order, and then more symbols light up and it goes to a different column, and you could do this like maybe like 3 times, just if you want this to be multiple layers rather than just one time that they've got to do it. If you want to make this more challenging, which you can do, there are a few different ways to do this. You can have a little timer, that the timer is going off while the players are trying to describe the different things, and that when the timer gets to the end, then maybe the person who's in there on their own with the lever, like poisonous gas or something starts to come through and they start taking poison damage, or vice versa. It can be in the room with the players. You could also have it that combat breaks out in the room which has got the other players in it, and so they have to try to describe these symbols while also in the middle of combat, and that could also make quite funny while the person in there with a lever is just annoyed that they can't help their friends, and they just want to try to deduce what order so that they can get out there and help them. And the idea of this is that when they put in the correct sequence, be it just one time if that's what you want to do, or if you want to do it a few times, like multiple times, maybe 3, once they put those in, the door opens, but also the wall which had the person trapped behind it also opens so they can rejoin the party. And it's just a fun little puzzle which is all to do with social kind of describing, because it can be a lot of fun when they're trying to describe different aspects of these different symbols which are here, like the little 3 with a little tail and a TV antenna, or the 2 Ks which are back to back on each other and different things, and it can cause a lot of funny things. Now, obviously, these are just examples. You don't have to use these symbols. These symbols are taken directly from Keep Talking and No One Explodes. You can use symbols which look really close to each other, which makes it a little bit more harder to describe. These are just different mathematical symbols, but there are symbols which can be hard to describe because it could mean one of 2 different things, because the orientation might be slightly different or that, and that can make it hard to describe and hard for them to understand. You can have it that if they press the wrong order, that something bad happens. It can trigger some kind of damage, be it an electric explosion, whatever. And so there's that aspect that you could also throw at this puzzle. You can also reverse it the other way, whereby you have the person who's in with the lever having to describe the symbols, because basically maybe on their ones, say these symbols came up, certain ones of them could light up, and they have to describe the ones which have lit up to the other party members, who have then got to find them around the room. Because the setup for this one could be that you literally put loads of different images of the different symbols on the table, and those players have got to listen to what's being described and touch the ones which are lit up, that the old player's telling them about, in a certain order. So you could do it that way round as well. But as with all of these puzzles, they're adaptable however the hell you want to use them. You said you don't have to use these symbols, you use whichever symbols you want, and it's just a fun little thing to get the players communicating with each other and trying to work out the best way to describe these things in order to get the message across. Now, to make things easier for you, I've actually got this image saved and in a Google Drive, so if you look down below in the description, this should be linked for you to be able just to get this, so you can just copy these ones exactly from Keep Talking and No One Explodes if you want to. But as I said, the options of which symbols you use are up to you. So the 5th puzzle is a very stupid yet fun one. It's stupid, I say, because it's kind of based on a pun, but it can be a very fun thing to throw at your players to see what they do with it. So the setup for this one is that your party walk into a room, and you can see there is a big ornate door in this room, and there are loads and loads and loads of different keyholes within this door, and that is why this is called the many keyhole puzzle. So they look at this door and they will see that there are many keyholes within this door. As they look around the room, they also find that there is piles of keys everywhere within this room. You can say there's piles of keys on the floor, there are piles of keys on the table, there's a table in here, there's piles of keys everywhere. But also in this room, there is a skeleton laying down somewhere within that. I know, fantastic skeleton image. Now what you might get is you might get some of the players trying to frantically pick up keys and looking at them and trying to investigate them and trying to see if they fit in the different holes. Spoiler alert, none of these keys will fit into any of these holes and help them out. But if they continue to investigate through the room, somewhere they will find the following message. Keys, keys everywhere. Everyone has the key, but nobody has easy access to it. The right key in hand will open all. So if you pause and try to read back through, you might be able to work out what the solution is to this puzzle. And if you do work it out before I tell you, then please let me know down in the comments down below. So the answer to this silly puzzle is that you take the right hand of the skeleton and use any of its digits to put it into any of the holes within the door and turn it, and it will open the door because it's a skeleton key. Ba-boom. I will dissect the clue to help people who might be struggling on how that came to that answer. So keys everywhere. Everyone has the key because everyone, or at least most of your players, will hopefully have hands, and obviously hand is the key. But nobody has easy access. The idea of that is a little pun and play on words, like nobody has easy access. The skeleton has no body, so he has easy access to the key. The right key in hand will open all. Trying to give that kind of like a, I'd say subtle, it's very blatant clue of like the right hand, like the right hand of the skeleton is the key that will open all of these, which will open all of the locks basically. So yes, it is a silly little play on words puzzle, but I like it for like, you know, if you've got like maybe like a villain who's kind of clown-esque or does things where they do a lot of play on words and puns, which I think is actually a really funny villain to portray. There is a variant on this that if you change the words, you can have it as being like a key, as in meaning maybe a piano key, and like maybe it being in like a grand room that's got a piano, and like if they play a certain key, like maybe they can find a sheet of music or something, and if they play that on the piano, the door will open. So there are like different variants along those lines that you can do, but as I said, you would have to change up the words which are in there for that. But like it's just another thing, like piano keys as another thing. But yeah, that is the 5th puzzle.
So I hope you enjoyed those puzzle ideas, and if you've got any yourself, please leave them down in the comment section down below and let me know what you think about any of the puzzles which were presented to you, or if there's a certain way that you think that you can adapt them. I would love to hear it down in the comments. And also, if you enjoyed what you saw, then why not consider hitting the subscribe button? Do not feel forced, the options are yours. It's just if you want to see more content like this and want to help a little man out, then why not consider that? Also, if you like D&D and want to support the channel, why not check out the Etsy of Gaming Treasure Chest, where you can see loads of delightful items that you can purchase, all to do with D&D and dice holders and dice towers and such. But do not feel forced, the options are yours. I hope you enjoy yourself, and until next time, goodbye.